probably the biggest impact that AI had on consumer fraud in general is a lot of people didn't have access to fraud. They didn't have access to big markets, now do. It opened doors where there was barriers of communication or barriers of gathering data.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do yourself one teeny tiny little favor and make sure to give us a follow, because I don't want you to miss out on any of the amazing guests I got coming on this year. And without further ado, I have a returning guest. So some of you guys who are OGs may have heard his episode a while back. So his episode has dropped back on February of 2023. So meaning it's been almost a year and a half since he's last been on the podcast. And at that point in time, I was probably a couple months back between when I interviewed people and actually released the episode. So I probably haven't talked to him on the podcast in like almost closer to 2 years now. It's been quite a while, but time has sure been flying. And I reached out to him once I got to 200 episodes. I was going through my episode list and seeing, which episodes performed the best and also which people I actually just genuinely enjoyed talking to. And I sent him an email to say if he wanted to come back, and he's back now. So for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to get to know you, to get to meet you, or get to hear our last episode together, tell us your quick elevator pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name is Robert Persichitte. I am a former auditor. I was an auditor for 10 years, including forensic audit. I worked in fraud with the state. I worked in big multi-million-dollar audits. I worked a lot of different types of audits. And now I am working with individuals, businesses, small businesses to be an auditor on your side. My main goal is to help people keep their money by avoiding fraud, mistakes, and taxes, and really applying that mindset. So if you're looking at something and saying, hey, this feels kind of fishy, might be a good deal. I want to bounce it off of somebody who is not trying to sell me anything, who is not trying to just push me into a product that they're selling. I'm the type of person you can talk to. Or I think I'm the person. I haven't met any other people like me. So you can think of me as a private auditor.
Amazing, Robert. And so we're not going to get into the backstory, because we already had you on the podcast. We learned about your journey, how you got to what you're doing. So if you haven't listened to that episode, it's episode, let me double check right now. This is episode, I think it's 100 and let's see. It is, of course, it doesn't say when I needed to show pop up. It's 100. It's going to be in the link below if you want to check out that episode. Long story short, it was a while ago. But let's kind of get into the topic of money, because when we last talked, AI wasn't really out. I mean, AI has been around since like the 50s or the 60s, if I'm not mistaken, but it hasn't been out the way it is now with all these voice cloning, tools and all these image generation tools and all these things. And it kind of hit the scene. And so I guess the first question I kind of want to start this conversation, and we'll see where it takes us from there, is like, once AI kind of like really went mainstream, what happened in your world? What happened in your life with your business? Because like that just added a whole another layer of complexity of things that a lot of people have never even seen before, heard before. And like I get calls now, and it's like I'll ask like, "Is this AI?" And like their response, I had one person which was a bot, but like told me like, "No, we're not AI" or something like that, and it responded back to me now. So it's getting crazy what people can do nowadays with all these scam calls and these fraud calls. So just take us back and seeing where, like, what was it like in your world once AI started really going mainstream?
So probably the biggest impact that AI had on consumer fraud in general is a lot of people who didn't have access to fraud. They didn't have access to big markets, now do. It opened doors where there was barriers of communication or barriers of gathering data. Those are gone. Those are completely gone now. And so somebody who doesn't speak English can jump in and perpetrate a fraud scheme because the AI translation tools and the AI writing tools are so phenomenally good. They are surprisingly making things more specific and a broader net at the same time. So what I mean by more specific is they can write for you specifically. They can find out more about you. They can aggregate it using these generative text tools, and then they can call you specifically. On top of that, they don't have to interact with that. That can be done in an automated fashion now. So they can craft an email and send it out to you, get it to you like that, for someone who potentially doesn't even speak English. They're getting in front of you. You are in their sights, right? If we think about it as a business, right, you have kind of like a marketing funnel where there's a lot of people that you're sending out these feelers to, you're sending out these solicitations to. Some of them are going to move down, and every step of the way, you're going to get more and more hyper-focused. What we've seen automated is really that first layer, that first contact where people are reaching out to you, and it is supercharging how many people can get contacted by fraudsters.
Yeah, it's not. It's just like, and that's what I talk about. Like, because I teach AI as well. Since like, I always talk about like how AI is making people more productive, more efficient, and more effective, and people who are using it, and even in bad hands, it's making them more productive, more efficient, and more effective. And it's insane, like how much you could, how much personalization AI can use on its own without you having to put anything in. It's like you set it up right the first time, and so that's super interesting to hear. And so I know another thing you wanted to talk about too is how all the with money, whether it's centralized and decentralized, and I think with younger people, like this whole the DeFi movement, right, which is like crypto and all these other currencies. I think we talked about some of the meme coins last time when you were on the podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And that period kind of phased, but like now, like I mean, crypto and all that stuff is still just as big, if not bigger. I think another interesting too, like that I want to talk on a little bit after crypto is sports betting. Sports betting since we last talked has been through the roof. So right now, let's talk about crypto. Like, what's going on with that space of like money? Because like there's a lot of like regulations normally with money, but like in that space there really isn't. So it's almost like you're going into the Wild West almost a little bit when you're out there.
Right. Well, it's a really interesting time. And I'm sure that everybody listening to me is going to get really mad and call me an idiot. And I'm really sorry. I'm going to try to do a nuanced view. I'm going to be right in the middle, because what you tend to talk to a lot of times is people who are strictly decentralized, where they think there will be no banks in the future, or people who are strictly, I want to stay with traditional finance and there's no benefit to going digital, right? There is some happy ground in the medium, or there's some happy medium in the middle ground here, that traditional finance isn't going to go away. It serves a very, very important purpose. And the foundation of our financial systems is trust. You have to trust that when you're giving your money to somebody, you're going to get it back, that you're getting a good deal. If you think you're getting a bad deal, or you think someone's going to screw you over, you're not going to do it. Where decentralized finance is trying to figure things out, is trying to say, how can we be more trustworthy? How can we get more people believing in what we're doing and act like a bank where you're comfortable putting your retirement savings here? One really big example of this is a lot of the entrance into buying Bitcoin in an ETF, right? You're getting that merge, that blending of traditional finance and decentralized finance. Not perfect, far from perfect. There's a lot of problems that go along with it still. But what is happening now, and what's becoming interesting, and I think it's down to that same point that you brought up of the rise of sports betting, is some people don't care. Some people view all investments as gambling. They view every investment as a casino, where for you to make $1, somebody else has to lose $1. It's a zero-sum game. We are going to screw somebody over for us to make money. And so for those people who feel that way, decentralized finance is a dream come true. If you go in saying, I'm smarter than everybody else and I can figure this out better than anybody else, why would you want regulations? You're the one in charge. You're the one doing it. The thing to remember with these decentralized finance, same with sports betting, the house always wins. It's not set up in your favor. And a lot of the regulation in the United States is set up to benefit small investors. And is it perfect? No. Is it going to maybe remove some opportunities that might exist for people who opt out of those regulations? So like private equity, private debt? Well, maybe, but it's still designed to protect the smallest investors. So when you're getting a dollar, it is not from somebody else. It is because of the fundamentals of finance that money today is more valuable than money in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, back to the point about like sports betting. I've been seeing the rise. I don't know if you know these. You would probably find these YouTube channels pretty interesting. There's one guy named CoffeeZilla, and another
Oh,
guy.
love them. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've been getting down like crack. They just crack down on people who are doing these, all these different like Ponzi schemes and pyramid schemes and all these things. And with sports betting, there's a lot of people who are like they're creating like discords and group chats and private membership subscriptions to have people bet, take their bets and stuff like that and hit their parlays. And
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things where it's interesting because like the best sports bet. I was watching some of these YouTube videos not too long ago, and they were saying like how some of these bet like the really good sports better, they'll get banned from betting at certain places because people know that they're these guys are gonna make money, a lot of money. And as you said, the
Yeah.
house always wins. And in their case, they always win. And so like sometimes they're not even allowed to bet. And so these people who have literally like no real experience actually betting will start these discords and are great at marketing, and they'll like get a bunch of people to join their community, and they're all paying to be in the community, and they're making more money off the community than they are off of bets. And that at first doesn't really sound like a traditional scam. It's not someone sending you an email with a fishy link. It's not someone sending you, calling you and saying, hey, do you want to yada yada yada. But like it's something that's still pretty scammy, but people are running it as almost it is a legit business. So can you talk on that a little bit? Because that's something I also seen a lot recently.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like a derivatives market or a futures market when we think about traditional finance. And what happens with those, they're hundreds of years old. These have been around for a really long time, where you can't buy or sell something directly. So they're banned, they're out, they can't bet. But they still have some insights about the future that are maybe valuable. And where I would think about this is in the futures market, and it's a really old movie at this point. Probably none of your viewers have seen it, Trading Places. But they're talking about I'm betting on, is the price of pork going to go up or down in the future? Is the price of pork going to move up or down? Is the price of oranges going to move up or down? This is actually really, really valuable information. Now, derivatives and futures, those secondary types of investments, those are a zero-sum game. For one person to make money, somebody has to lose money. Somebody has to say, hey, I think the price is going to be high. Another person has to say, I think it's going to be low. And then whoever was right makes money. Whoever was wrong loses money, right? Those have existed for a really long time, and they're actually pretty helpful for farmers. And if you can think of, you're a farmer and you're basing your life and your income on your crop, and you don't know how much it's worth in a year, but you have people betting on how much it's worth, and you can use those bets to figure out how much you can sell it for, how much you can set it aside, that's helpful. Now, with sports betting, uh, you know, people are not making and losing their life savings here, hopefully. But there is a special piece of information. Some people have special information and they cannot directly participate, so they're selling that information. Now, where the scam part comes in, because I don't want to defend them, where the scam part comes in is they're making assertions about the future. And so it's almost impossible to say, well, who knows? Why is this better? And if they can walk you through your process and you like the process and you understand why and you want to use that process, well, then maybe it makes sense. But in most cases, it's a wild guess. And it's not even a scientific guess. It is, I'm throwing this out in the universe here, seeing if anybody wants to buy it. And I have no idea better than anybody else, but I talk really good or I look really good, and people are going to give me money just for that, not necessarily being smarter than everybody else or having a proven track record. I mean, even if you do have a proven track record, it's not great. It's a known problem called survivorship bias. Of if you had a terrible track record, you'd quit doing it, right? So everybody who's doing it has a better than average track record because you would have quit if you weren't better than average.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things of a fine line between a scam and a ripoff. And somebody saying I can predict the future, well, if they can, you could pay them, but you have no way to evaluate that in most of these people's cases. You're just evaluating it based on a slick website or a temporary short-term wins that could have been just luck.
Yeah. Let me ask you a quick question. What would you say is the difference between a scam and a ripoff?
I think it's a fine line. When I say something's a ripoff, you can look at it, you can see it transparently, you understand every element of it, and it's not a good deal, but you're going to do it anyway. And so I would think of that like you're at a football stadium paying $5 for a bottle of water, right? You know you're paying $5 for that bottle of water. It's not a mystery to you. It's a ripoff. It's way more than a bottle of water can cost you or should cost you, but you kind of understand why, right? And it's there, it's available. A scam would be somebody closing the shop, standing in front of the shop and saying, I got $6 water bottles, right? Not telling you that there's $5 water bottles behind you. You don't have the ability to see that there's cheaper water bottles. It's just them hiding information from you in order to obscure it. And, the step above that would be fraud, which is an intent. You're not just lying, but you're lying to get something. You're lying because you want something from that person. You're either lying or hiding the truth to get something. I mean, all of these, you might be listening and thinking that does all sound very, very similar, and they are. They're all very, very similar. It's just what information was available and how did that information get hidden from you that differentiates fraud between a ripoff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. I never heard anyone break it down that way, but now that you mention it, yeah, like rip off, it's like that's at least they're like it's kind. I'm not gonna say just, but like they're not like scamming. Like you're paying kind of like for like as your example at the ball game, you're paying for like the convenience, right? You're
Yeah.
paying for you don't have to walk outside the stadium to go to the supermarket to go get water. You're paying for the convenience, in the proximity, right? Whereas a scam and fraud, it's like, all right, they're trying to get something out of you. One is a little bit worse, but they're hiding something or not telling you the whole picture. When you were talking, something randomly came to mind. I didn't keep up with too much, but now that you're here and you were talking about like traditional banks and stuff like that versus like decentralized, and what was going on in your head for like during that whole the Silicon Valley incident? Because that
Yeah.
happened
Silicon
since
Valley Bank.
yeah, because that
Mm-hmm.
was like for anyone that's listening, and I'm pretty sure you could probably explain it better than I could. But from what I understood, pretty much a bank went under and didn't have the money, and the government kind of just came in and swooped in to save them a little bit instead of letting them just completely crash. And in the meantime, I think it was like I think it was like over 5 different banks within like a small window of time, all kind of just went under. If I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
it was messy.
It was really messy. So there were different banks that went through. So we have really three big, big failures. And I wanted to make sure I got it right here. So it's Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and First Republic. Each one of those had a very different outcome here. So Silicon Valley Bank, basically their problem was they made a bet that interest rates would not rise. And they put a lot of money behind this bet, and that money was going to be tied up for 20 years. They tied up money, 20 years worth of money, on the bet that interest rates would not rise. Interest rates did rise. They lost that bet, and that bet was too big. They put too much money behind that bet, and they probably would have been fine if people didn't start panicking and saying, hey, my account here is not insured. And so if they lose that bet, I'm going to lose my money. So they started pulling out their money. And that's what we have as a bank crisis, bank failure. That was an interesting case because the government stepped in and bailed out the investors. in that case. So anyone who, or excuse, not the investors, the government stepped in and bailed out the depositors, the people who had money at the bank. And what was really interesting about that case is the government took it a step further to say, on paper, we only have to guarantee accounts up to $250,000. We're going to guarantee all the accounts. What was interesting about them is they would have made it. If people didn't panic, they would have made it. If everyone left their accounts in the bank, would have been fine. And that's true with almost every bank failure. Every bank failure is fine unless everybody pulls their money out. Even scams are like that, where if you have a Ponzi scheme, if nobody pulled money out of the Ponzi scheme, it would go up forever. But why would you want an investment that you can't pull money out of, right? This was kind of that. I mean, that's kind of what happened with the bank. It's just they made some assumptions that were there. And this is back to that same purpose of the government is set up to protect people for the centralized finance. So they made everybody whole. Now, the other two bank failures there, Signature Bank and First Republic, those ended up getting purchased. So other larger companies said, you know what, it's actually worth it for us to just take some losses on this to gain these customers. Because they had really high net worth affluent customers that they were going to sell them a bunch of services to. So the government could have stepped in, but they didn't have to.
Yeah. All right. So like, then let me ask you, like, as an everyday person, like, most of that stuff probably went in one ear and out the other. But like for the people who like
Okay.
pay attention to that stuff, like, what most people don't really pay attention, or at least, or don't understand. Even if they did hear, don't understand like what actually went on and all the intricacies of like what was at play. And so it's like, then to kind of tie it back to what we were talking about with decentralized finance and traditional financing, like if something like that were to happen in like DeFi, like would the depositor have lost their money? Like what would have happened? Like let's say instead of a Silicon Valley bank failing, it was like, let's say Bitcoin failed or something like that, right? What would be different?
Yeah. Well, we saw it already. So Terra and Luna and Celsius are all examples of those are bank failures. They're all
Yeah.
bank failures, and it's basically too many people are pulling money out of the bank. Now, what's different between a bank and a stock, or a bank and a piece of digital asset like a cryptocurrency, is at a bank, if you put $1 in the bank, you have $1 at the bank, and the bank has to give you $1 back, and they can't negotiate with you. They can't say, hey, we'll give you 75 cents on the dollar, because if they did, the government would step in and say, no, you're a bank, you're not a stock market, you're not a gambling spot, you are taking money and giving it back, right? For anything, and this includes stocks, if more people are pulling out of the investment than people who are buying into the investment, we have an imbalance, and it drives the price up or down. Usually what happens, and I think Terra and Luna is a really great example of this, as we saw that price start to go down. Oh, wait, what was that?
I was gonna say, and for anyone who doesn't know what Terra and Luna are.
Oh, those are digital assets that were supposed to be stable coins. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Terra and Luna were, yeah, sorry. As they went down, people panicked. And people started pulling money out, and it accelerated that problem into the ground. So what's interesting about digital assets, it's who knows if they'll ever go to zero, but they'll keep going down as long as nobody's buying into it. And it's just supply and demand. It's basic supply and demand. There is no bailout. There is no FDIC for digital assets.
And so in that case, a lot of people probably would have lost their money then, or at least lost a lot more money.
Right. And that's just how it works. I mean, you're in an unregulated asset. If you're in something that's risky, you can lose your money. I mean, I think that's sounds like common sense when you put it in a sentence like that, but most people don't think that's what risk means. People think risk means the price is going to go up and down a lot, but it really means that price could go to zero, or it could get very close to zero where you don't have your money anymore. You don't have access to your money anymore. That's the problem.
And on the topic of like risk and losing out on money, like now fast forward a bit, right? 2024. What are some of the main things you've been seeing and that have been working in terms of like getting like scams and frauds and different things like that that have been succeeding um in 2024 so that people can make sure to keep a lookout for that stuff? Like what are some of the most popular scams, frauds and things of that nature in 2024? And if you could like if there's any that you could predict that are probably going to become popular that we should look out for, how can we make sure that we're aware of all this stuff so that when these AI phone call comes or these super hyper personalized emails hit our inbox, we can be able to decipher which one is actually legit versus some undercover scam phishing operation
Yeah.
going on.
So, objectively, the fastest growing scam is what's called pig butchering. And it is a type of investment scam. It's really a mix of a bunch of old scams put together. But at its heart, it's an investment scam. And it is somebody saying, here is this account that you should invest in, and you'll get really rich. And that can be a digital asset account. It can be faked to look like a traditional finance account. But the typical signs is that they are wanting to have some type of transfer outside of the banking system. So they're wanting you to buy a cryptocurrency and then transfer that cryptocurrency. What happens in the scam is they will make a fake website that shows your investment value going up and encourage you to put more and more of your own money into this scam. Now, the problem with it is once you try to pull out anything, if you try to pull out $1, they're going to hit the brakes. They're going to turn it off, and you're never going to hear from them again. So they're going to just entice you to keep putting money in, and you're going to see that bank account balance go up, 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 but it's just on paper. It's not real. It's completely fake. FBI showed that was the fastest growing scam, but it falls in its own umbrella. Identity theft is really the biggest and will continue to be the biggest for a long time. And I think where identity theft is going to get a lot better is these AI models, including the generative AI like ChatGPT, can make guesses about a person to gain access to systems or to gain access to credit. And so they can read through your entire online presence. They can read through your Facebook account, through your other online accounts to really build an accurate profile about who you are, where you're from, what types of issues you might be facing as a person, and fake it, completely fake it. So opening like a GoFundMe, opening credit cards, gaining access to your banking, I think that's going to be the next big step. Be clean with the data that you're sharing online. Realize that not just your friends are seeing this, but scammers are seeing this as well. Whenever possible, try to do private or encrypted messages. Try to communicate with the people you're trying to communicate with, as opposed to spreading your information across the internet. But I mean, all these things kind of suck. And if they're listening to the podcast, if they're watching on Instagram, well, you're a user of social media, and it's not fair for me to come in and say completely change your life. It's just be smart about it and limit the types of things that you're posting, and don't post anything that might be linked to one of your financial records. Don't post your secret question answers. Don't show your passwords. Don't give clues to your passwords. Don't give anything that can give anybody a clue or a moment to try to jump in. And then also just be skeptical of everybody that you're seeing, especially if they're asking you to leave the traditional finance system. Because one of the safest ways to do a transaction as a consumer is the credit card. If you use your credit card and you get ripped off and you get money stolen from you, if it's a scam, if it's truly a scam, if it's fraud, you're not on the hook. The bank is on the hook. That's the bank's problem. And so that's why scammers and fraudsters are always steering you away from the banking system, because there's all these protections in place where they're not going to get their money, because the banks don't screw around. The banks are going to protect their money. And you better believe if a transaction looks fishy to the bank, they're using their AI systems and their internal audit departments to protect you before that money even leaves your account, because it's their money.
Yeah, I remember one time I went shopping. It was me, my sister, um, and my best friend, and we went shopping at this outlet. I forget. I think it was in Jersey, and I live in Connecticut. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
I ended up uh I think I was buying school. I think we went school shopping for my little sister at the time, and we were just hitting stores left and right. We're not buying crazy amounts of stuff, but like we'll buy like a T-shirt here and maybe a pair of leggings there. And it was an outlet kind of mall, so stores right next to each other. And I remember um that one of my Chase cards had actually got frozen. It got declined, and then I called Chase.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up having to use one of my other cards, but I called Chase afterwards. And it was like, yeah, there was too many transactions within a certain time period and different places, and so we shut it off. And I was like, oh, okay, well, thanks. I mean, it's a little annoying because when you go up and you get your card declined, it's like, okay, that's awkward. Fortunately, we were the last people in the store, so there's not, no one else waiting for me. But yeah, as you said, the banks don't play about their money. And if you have a credit card, I always say, like, because I'm into points and miles, so I like using my credit card anyways. But that's also one of like the hidden
Yeah.
benefits of like using credit cards. It's like you get your not only your own, pretty much like you have to look out for yourself, but like you get this whole department which has billions of dollars in funding for most of like these bigger banks. Billions and hundreds of millions of dollars go into these fraud departments to make sure that the bank's money isn't messed with. So I'm a big supporter of using your credit cards to pay for as much as you can. Of course, financially responsibly, of course, but if you're gonna pay for something anyways, might as well use your credit card. And another thing too that you mentioned about passwords, I've been using this one website called One Password, and
Mm-hmm.
to because like with Apple, if you use the iCloud passwords, whatever, well, if someone hacks your iCloud, then they have everything. So like having a third party that has no affiliation to any of these, phone companies or whatever, um, it's something I did. I think maybe 2 years ago. It was a while ago. I've been paying for them for a while. I think it's maybe $30 a year. And I was in this whole like cybersecurity phase for maybe like a week. So I was watching a bunch of videos. So like I even have what's called like a double blind password. So like for anyone listening,
Mm-hmm.
it's where I'll have my thing, one password, auto generate a strong password, and then I'll have like my own like code or something or phrase that I'll attach at the end of the password. So let's say someone were to hack my
Mm-hmm.
one password account, they would have all the passwords, but the second phrase is in my head. So even if you hacked into my one password, which is almost impossible, right? And you get all those passwords, you still won't be able to log into anything because you don't have the other piece to it. So like the whole proponent behind like a double blind password is like no one would ever be able to hack you for. They can, but it'll be a lot harder because your one password or your password manager doesn't know the phrase, and the phrase doesn't know the
Mm-hmm.
password. So it's like it makes it a lot harder. But yeah,
It's a problem, and you got these smart engineers really trying to stay one step ahead of the scammers. And as a consumer, you want to be safe, and you want to be as safe as you can. And you have to make sure that you're not the least safe person, because that's who the scammers are going after.
yeah, 100%. And you mentioned something about AI too that hit my mind when you were talking about like Facebook and social media and protecting yourself. And I'm kind of blanking, but it was something along the lines of like a lot of people listening are like entrepreneurs, business owners, right? So it's like you're kind of
Mm,
are out there, right? Like you almost kind of have to be
yeah,
in a way.
you have to be.
And so it's like, um, what are some ways you kind of recommend for people, especially who like there's a lot of like service-based business owner where like branding isn't as important. For example, my dad's a landscaper. He's just strictly word of mouth for the most part. Like he has no virtual. But for
Mm-hmm.
like someone like myself as a like who's trying to intentionally build out a personal brand, and like being out and online is a big part of like me growing, like what are some things you recommend to like as just like best practices? We mentioned password manager so far,
Yeah.
using your credit card.
Well, one of my favorites is if you go back. This is old. This happened in the year 2000. Sarah Palin, vice presidential candidate at the time, you got to get out there. You got to put stuff out there. She published a book. In her book, she published all of the password recovery questions to her MSN account. So, like, what street did you live on as a kid? What was your first pet's name? What's your mother's maiden name? All those types of questions. She published them all in a book. So, someone was able to get in and take over her personal accounts because of
Sheesh.
that. So, just because you're getting your name out there doesn't mean you have to share your most personal, intimate details. And things can also be smart with the timing. So, for example, it's been forever that people said, "Hey, I'm going to be out of town on vacation from this time to this time." You wouldn't want to broadcast that, right? That is telling people, here's when I'm not available. Here is when it's going to be difficult for me to reset my accounts. Or in terms of physical access, you can come rob me. No one's going to be home for the next few weeks, right? That's old knowledge. That's old tidbits of knowledge. It's not new. Use that. Use that same mentality, because in the end, AI didn't fundamentally change how people lie. It didn't change how people steal. Those concepts have been around for as long as humanity has been around. And the one that I love is really, are we worried about deep fakes or someone faking us? Well, someone handing me a piece of paper saying, your child is in danger, right? That doesn't take any technology to fake a pen and paper. That, if I believe it and am going to do what they say, is an effective scam. And so there's no easy answers, but it is using that same old type of logic, that old common sense there.
Yeah, common sense isn't common, as they always say. So yeah,
That's right.
yeah, Rob, man, I feel like I could keep talking to you about this stuff. I don't remember if I did or not, but did I ask you the famous 5 questions last time you were on the podcast?
I think you did.
I think,
I
well,
think
it's
you
been
did.
almost 2 years now, so let's see what.
We'll see how prepared I am.
Oh, before we get into that, though, where can we find you? Where can we keep up with you? How can we get in contact with you? Because as I said, this fishy stuff is never going to end ever, and having someone like you, like when we need it and before we need it, is super important. That way, when stuff like this comes up, we have a contact to call, we have a contact to reach out to, and we're not scrambling after getting scammed.
Easiest way is head to my website, delagify.com, DELAGIFY. You can find fraud resources and schedule an appointment.
And is there anything exciting that you're working on right now that you have up and coming that you can give a sneak peek in, like any like
Well,
workshops,
I'm
anything?
doing some more. I'm doing some more research, trying to do some publications on how do people fall for schemes and what are the holes that victims have in their logic or in their thought process, because it's not the victim's fault, but we all want to prevent ourselves from becoming victims.
No, 100%, 100%. If when you have that, let me know because I'll definitely put it in the link in the show notes below. But let's get it right into the famous 5. As I said, it's been over 2 years since, or close to 2 years since we last caught up. So, question number 1 is, what is the most impactful lesson you've learned in life?
I think probably just skepticism and the ability to discern information. So, not everything you see is true. What's your framework for figuring out if this is new information I should use to shape my life or change my life?
What is the most admirable trait a person can have?
Integrity. If you are always behaving the same way and if you're a good person, you're a good person whether or not somebody's watching you being a good person.
If you had to change someone's life but only had one book, which would you recommend?
Ooh. I would say that's the Book of Bad Arguments. It's badargumentsbook.com. You can read it for free, and it will teach you how to spot things that are technically true but leading you to believe a wrong conclusion.
Okay. That's an interesting one. I haven't heard that one before. And okay, what is the legacy that you're working on leaving behind?
I think this is always the same for me. I want bad guys to not like me. I want to ruin someone's day if they're trying to rip people off. I want people to see my name come up, and if they're a scammer, to get frustrated and annoyed that that is coming up.
And for anyone that wants to embark on their walk 12 today, what is the first step you recommend they take?
Um, you know, do your research, and more importantly, understand your sources, understand why people are telling you what to do, and understand everybody has some edge, everybody has something they're trying to get out of the situation. Figure out what theirs is before you go believing what they're saying.
All righty, and that's all for the podcast, Robert. Thanks again for hopping on. Thanks again for being willing to hop
Yeah.
on the podcast, not once, just for the second time. And so excited to have, to catch up with you and see what's going on nowadays with the scamming world, because there's always so much that you can keep up with, and they're always trying to get, they're always trying to stay 1 foot in front of us so they can get our money. So thanks for, enlightening us and showing us what we need to look out for nowadays.
All right. Happy to help. Always a pleasure.